So today we're going to be talking about the day-to-day reality for UX UI designers. Specifically, what types of meetings you'll be asked to participate in, along with some tips that I've learned and some colleagues of mine have learned as well. So let's get started. Agile meetings. Okay, so you've probably heard about Agile methodology in project and product management, but sometimes it's confusing to know how much user experience designers and team members are expected to participate in the Agile meetings and kind of what your role is in those types of meetings. So again, this is just from my experience and the experience of my UX community that I'm familiar with, but it could vary between companies. Agile meetings include backlog groomings, sprint plannings, sprint retrospectives, scrums, stand-ups, and these meetings are generally run by a product manager or product owner or scrum master, and usually it does vary on the company, but usually the UX team members are very well integrated into the Agile framework of a company, and so you'll be expected to join these meetings, and they can be really helpful to get more of an insight as a designer into the execution of the product as a whole. So you'll get to collaborate with developers, QA, product owners, and be able to all be on the same page about the product. So one example meeting is a backlog grooming, and a UX UI designer will often be asked to be able to talk through a certain ticket. So maybe the product owner pulls up a ticket in the backlog and the designer is asked to walk through at a high level the purpose of the ticket. Let's say it's a new feature, why it's a new feature that we've designed and want to build, what the purpose is, how it will work, and at a high level kind of map out and go over the design documentation, explaining to the developers that the developers can give an estimate to the product owner in terms of how much effort, how many hours they think it would take, so that the product owner can then groom the backlog, put it into the next sprint, and then that's how the feature then gets put into the next sprint and executed by the development team. So design reviews, either with peers or a UX UI manager. These are very common meetings that you'll be expected to have as a UX UI designer. Generally, you have written some kind of design documentation and you're presenting mock-ups, whether that's in a prototype form or directly inside of a tool like Adobe XD or Figma. And during this design review meeting, you may be expected to, at a high level, go through the designs to the UX UI manager or your peers in a group setting, be able to explain the overarching purpose of what you're designing, the design reasoning behind it, how you came up with some of these designs. If there was user testing and user research involved, you'd be expected to speak to that at a high level. And then lastly, it would usually be opened up to the team or for the manager to give their feedback. So my biggest piece of advice before these types of design reviews is to practice by doing a dry run. So either do it to yourself or maybe a teammate beforehand, but I do this all the time. I find that it's a really great way to catch many little things by practicing in this presentation mode. It's a good way to work out the kinks, or maybe you identify some little small errors in the designs that you hadn't noticed beforehand. Plus it allows you to practice speaking clearly and confidently, and you can get feedback from that other person, so that when you go into a design review or a design presentation, you have that extra layer of confidence and you're ready to receive the feedback. The second piece of advice I would give for these design reviews is to really be humble and open to feedback. No one likes to feel like they're walking on eggshells and they can't give you feedback. Feedback is the best way, even if it's not always the most pleasant, feedback is the best way to grow as a designer, to improve your design eye, to expand your mind to possibilities or ideas that you hadn't previously thought of. These feedback and design review meetings are incredibly beneficial and enriching, so even if it's a little painful at first or at times, I would just suggest to be open to feedback, because that's really how you're going to become a better designer. Planning meetings. So often on a UX team, these will be used for research and testing planning. So you can create documents such as user research plans and user testing plans in this method. So a user research plan will look at things like documenting the goals of the user research, the research methods that you'll be using, the metrics that you'll be judging the user research against, and the logistics as well. This goes often hand in hand with user test plans. So user test plans outline things like how you're going to actually carry out user testing efforts, in terms of logistics. So how will you recruit participants? What will the roles be on the team? So who's going to actually be asking the participants the questions versus who's going to be note taker? Things like what task scenarios you're going to ask the participants to execute. So often if you're doing user testing with a prototype, you'll map out these exact tasks that you'll ask in a non-biased way to execute your user test, so that you can have some task scenarios and metrics to judge it against, whether that's qualitative or quantitative metrics. Another type of meeting, and actually my favorite kind of meeting that UX UI designers might attend, are brainstorming meetings. So these can take many shapes and forms. Sometimes it's a post-it frenzy where there's a prompt given to the team and everyone just goes crazy doing brainstorming activities or ideation activities. There are different structures you can use, but this is a really nice time to connect with your fellow designers, to learn from them. That's all I've got for you today. I wanted to expose you to some of the day-to-day meetings that you'll be asked to join as a UX UI designer. I know it was kind of a grey area for me before I got into the world of UX. I didn't exactly know what are the actual meetings, who are the actual team members that I'll be interacting with when I'm a designer. So hopefully this helps, and I'll see you next time on UX Marks the Spot.